My name wasn't crossed out. It simply wasn't there. I found the will 2 days after Walter's funeral, slipped between a stack of sympathy cards and a folder labeled estate planning. I don't think they meant for me to see it. At least, not yet. But I did. And I read every word slowly, carefully, like someone reading a language they once knew, but had hoped never to speak again. The house left to my eldest nephew. The savings to support the next generation. The heirlooms to be divided among direct blood relatives. Not a single line for me. Not a thank you. Not a gesture. Not even a mention. I folded the paper gently, as if rough hands might wake something best left sleeping. Then I walked back into the kitchen where they were laughing over red wine and leftover ham, talking about how Walter would have loved all this. No one asked where I had gone. No one looked up when I sat down. For most of my life, I made it easy to be overlooked. I was the one who stayed late, swept the floor, remembered the birthdays no one else did. I raised their children when their parents couldn't. I held Walter's hand through illness and sleep. I didn't ask for anything, never thought I'd have to. But there's something they forgot. You don't have to erase a name to make someone disappear. You just have to hope she won't remember who she is. The only problem is I do. And I'm still here. I never expected anything grand from life. I came from a family where women knew how to make themselves small so others could breathe easier. I learned early on how to sew a hymn, rid a face, and tell when someone needed a warm plate more than a conversation. I was quiet, useful, uncomplicated. Walter was my older brother, 2 years apart. We grew up side by side, and even as adults we never drifted far. He got married young. She was beautiful, restless too. She left him after 10 years, and 3 children not out of hatred, just a kind of weariness that never softened. Walter raised the boys as best he could, but he needed help. That help, for better or worse, was me. I moved in when the youngest, Leo, was still in diapers. What was supposed to be temporary, just until Walter found his footing, became permanent quietly, without ceremony. The boys began calling me Tia. When they were small, a twist on Tia that stuck like gum to the soul. They were loud, demanding, hungry for attention, and I gave it to them. Every ounce. I did the morning routines, the scraped knees, the forgotten homework. I cooked enough meals to feed a church congregation and washed more uniforms than I could count. I never took a vacation. I never dated. My life became a hallway of doors. I never opened all for the sake of the ones I tucked in at night. And I was fine with that. Walter used to say, "If there's anyone I trust more than myself, it's you." I wore that sentence like armor. It kept me warm in the winters and upright in the storms. He never remarried. We shared the house like old shoes worn in the right places, comfortable in the quiet. When he got sick, it was slow. Subtle at first, missed words, repeated stories, a confusion he tried to laugh off. I was the one who noticed. The boys were busy, then married, working, sending short texts instead of visits. So I kept watch. By the time the diagnosis came early, onset Alzheimer's, we were already in it. I managed everything. Doctor's appointments, medications, mood swings, sleepless nights. I learned how to coax him into the shower when he forgot how water worked. I learned how to soothe him when he mistook me for someone else. The boys offered help now and then. A check in the mail. A short weekend drop by. But it was always me doing the real work. And I never asked for more. Because I didn't need praise. I only needed place. I believed foolishly, perhaps, that when the end came they would remember that. that Walter's will would reflect what we both knew, that I wasn't a guest in this house. I was part of its bones. But when he died quietly on a Tuesday morning, I felt something shift before I even saw the papers. It started with small things. Keys that no longer fit the lock. Decisions made without me. Rooms rearranged while I was out buying groceries. The boys, now men in their 40s, began speaking about plans in voices they thought I wouldn't hear. Leo, the one I raised like a son, called me Aunt Isabel in front of the lawyer. Formal. Distant. Then came the boxes. They packed up Walter's things first. Then mine. No one said I had to leave, not directly. But the message arrived anyway, disguised as a question. Wouldn't it be nice to live somewhere quieter now? That's when I asked to see the will. And that's when I found the blank, where my name should have been. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I smiled. Because what they didn't know, what no one ever noticed in all those years, is that I have a very good memory. And Walter did too. He was many things forgetful near the end, yes, but careless. Never. And long before the decline, he had written something signed, something tucked it away with the same quiet faith he gave to me. They thought they'd planned everything, but they forgot the most dangerous kind of woman, the one who remembers, and the one who waits. After the funeral, the house grew noisier but colder. Relatives I hadn't seen in years came in and out like they owned the place, dropping off casseroles, giving each other hugs that lasted too long, and talking about who would take over now that Walter's gone. I was there, of course, in the kitchen, making coffee, refilling ice trays, keeping the washing machine running. Still useful, but no longer included. Leo and his wife Caroline moved in less than a week after we buried Walter. They didn't ask. They just did it. She brought scented candles and expensive throw pillows, rearranged the living room for better energy. He replaced the locks, told me it was for security. I didn't get a new key. That's when I started to write things down. Not in anger, not even in sadness, in clarity. A notebook hardcover navy blue with clean white pages. I listed dates, conversations, exact phrases. The day Caroline referred to me as just Walter's sister-in-law, not really part of the estate. The morning Leo mentioned a long-term care facility while speaking on the phone, assuming I couldn't hear him from the hallway. I heard everything. I always had. When they left documents out on the counter, I read them, quietly. A lawyer's name I didn't recognize. Signatures I hadn't seen before. The second will typed, formatted, stamped, had no trace of Walter's handwriting. No warm ink. Just clean betrayal in black and white. The night I found it, they were asleep upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp on low and read every word. My name wasn't removed. It had never been written. They hadn't even bothered to pretend. That's what cut deepest. I didn't cry. I boiled water for tea, took down Walter's old briefcase from the top shelf. It was dusty. Inside were insurance papers, a copy of our mortgage, his military discharge certificate, and a manila envelope thick with documents paper-clipped together, with a small note in Walter's slanted handwriting, just in case. Give this to Martin. Martin was Walter's oldest friend. A retired notary, now half-deaf, but still sharp as a knife when it came to legal matters. He had helped Walter draft the original will years ago, handwritten, signed, notarized. And in that version, I was listed clearly co-owner of the house, sole executor beneficiary of all assets, in the event of his passing. Walter had trusted me even to the very end, but his sons didn't. Or maybe they simply didn't care. They saw what they wanted, a house. a savings account, a woman in her 70s who still cooked dinner and didn't raise her voice. They thought silence meant surrender. That was their mistake. Because silence, true silence, is not absence. It's storage. And I had stored everything. Even the small recording Walter had made the night after his second stroke. It wasn't dramatic. He just sat in the living room with the tape recorder I'd used for old church music and spoke like he was talking to a version of me he feared might not be there one day. If anything ever happens, he said, his voice rough but calm, Isabel gets the house. All of it. She's earned more than anyone ever will. He paused. If they try to fight you, use this. I had kept that recorder tucked inside a shoebox in my closet. I had forgotten it existed, but now I played it every night for a week, not because I needed reassurance, because I needed resolve. It's strange what betrayal does to you. It doesn't always hurt. Sometimes it focuses you, makes things clearer than they've ever been. You start to see who you are, not in their eyes, but in your own. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was awake, and I was done being quiet. It was Leo's birthday when I decided it was time to act. They threw a party in the backyard full of music, catered food fairy lights strung along the fence. Caroline wore a silky dress that caught the breeze like a flag, and Leo beamed as if he had built the house with his own hands. I helped serve drinks, smiled when spoken to, and stood quietly by the patio door while they toasted to new beginnings. I remember Caroline raised a glass and said, "To family and the future." She didn't look at me when she said it. Later that evening, I brought out the last tray of desserts and overheard her whispering to a guest near the garden gate. "She's still here," she said, laughing lightly. "I keep telling Leo we really should move forward with the plan." The guest asked something I couldn't hear. Caroline replied, "Oh no, she hasn't signed anything. But she's old. It's only a matter of time." That night, after the house had gone quiet, I sat at the dining table and pressed record. It wasn't rehearsed. I simply spoke the truth. I told the story of how I had helped raise those boys, of the meals, the bedtime songs, the doctor's visits, the nights Walter couldn't remember my name, but I stayed anyway. I told it plainly, slowly, without embellishment. I didn't cry. I just stated facts. Then I played Walter's recording. I copied the file to a USB and slipped it into the manila envelope with the handwritten will. I wrote a letter just one page to Martin the notary and mailed it by express courier the next morning. Elise, the girl at the post office, asked if I wanted tracking. I said, "No need. It'll find its way." 2 weeks passed. Then the first call came. Martin's voice was calm but clipped. "I've reviewed everything he said. The second will doesn't hold up. Too many inconsistencies. We can file a petition to restore the original." I thanked him, hung up, went to the kitchen and made tea. Chamomile. That afternoon, Leo came home to find me sitting in the living room, his living room as he called it now, with the file open on the table. He looked at the papers, then at me. "What is this?" he asked, voice tight. "The truth," I said. He scoffed. "This won't go anywhere." I tilted my head. "Then why are you sweating?" He left the room, slammed the door. Caroline didn't speak to me for 3 days. The silence was refreshing. Then came the formal notice from Martin's lawyer, a motion to contest the second will and enforce the original, citing the audio recording and notarized signature. The house would be frozen, no sale, no refinancing, no legal claim until the matter was resolved. Leo accused me of betrayal. I said, "So now you believe I'm capable of something." The following week, he tried to bring up my memory, my health to family friends. I invited 2 of them over for lunch. We sat on the porch, and I recited poetry I had memorized 40 years ago. I corrected them on state tax law. I explained the medical regimen Walter had been on during the final stage of his dementia. No one asked about my memory again. At night, I slept better than I had in years. Caroline started pacing more, made hushed phone calls from the garage. Leo grew quiet. The pride in his walk dulled like a suit, worn too many times in the rain. They thought I'd fade. Instead, I became undeniable, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out or shame them in front of others. I simply lived in the truth. I let the weight of facts do the shouting. The final blow came during a family brunch. The rest of the nephews were there, their wives, the children. Someone brought up the will. Whispers, glances. I stood up, took a small speaker from my bag, played Walter's voice aloud for the first time. If anything happens to me, he said, Isabel gets the house. She's earned more than anyone ever will. No one looked at me after that, but no one questioned me either. I turned off the speaker. I sat back down, and I finished my tea. I didn't ask them to leave. That's the part they still don't understand. I didn't need to lock the doors or call the police or shout at anyone from the top of the stairs. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply sat at the table, opened my folder, and reminded them quietly what truth sounds like. The lawyer called a week after the brunch. "We're moving forward," he said. "The judge has agreed to hear the case. With the original, will the recording and your statement it's strong?" I thanked him, then went to the garden and trimmed the lavender bushes. The ones Walter planted years ago. I didn't feel triumphant, just restored, as if a part of me that had gone numb had returned to its rightful place. Leo avoided me. Caroline, too. The children tiptoed around me like I was some old artifact with a history they didn't want to understand. That was fine. I wasn't there to be loved anymore. I was there to be seen. One morning I found Caroline in the kitchen, eyes swollen, hands shaking as she buttered toast. "We never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I stirred my tea. "That's the problem," I said. "You didn't think of me at all." Later that month, a letter arrived from the court. The second will was voided. The house and all assets were reverted to my name per Walter's original instructions. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted clarity. Leo stood in the doorway, with a small suitcase looking at me like a child being told recess was over. "So, that's it?" he asked. I looked at him not with anger, but with the kind of steady calm I'd reserved all those years for scraped knees and broken rules. "You made your plans," I said. "Now I'm making mine." He didn't fight. He just nodded and walked out. No shouting, no explanations. Just the silence of someone realizing the person they thought they could use had never been theirs to control. Caroline left a week later. She didn't say goodbye. I walked through the empty rooms after they were gone. The quiet was heavier, but somehow kinder. The house felt like it could breathe again. So could I. I updated the will one final time. No more family names. No more assumptions. Instead, I listed a women's foundation that provided housing for elderly women forced out of their homes. I left a note with the new documents. Let this house belong to women who remember too much and were told too often to forget. I didn't leave space for questions. I didn't need to. Some stories aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be lived through and written down. Would you have done the same? Would you have sat through the laughter of those who planned your erasure, just to show them how loud the truth can echo? Have you ever been quietly removed from the table, only to return with the deed in your name? These days, the house is quieter, no doors slamming, no footsteps in the hallway that hesitate outside my door, no hushed voices assuming I can't hear. Just the sound of the kettle whistling in the morning and the lavender brushing against the window pane in the evening breeze. I keep the windows open now. I like the way the air moves through the rooms, lifting curtains like breath. The home feels different, not empty or clearer, like something has been scrubbed clean, not with bleach, but with truth. Some neighbors ask if I get lonely. I smile and tell them I've been alone before. But now, I'm alone on my own terms. The family doesn't visit. Not anymore. There are no birthday cards, no awkward phone calls, just silence. And strangely, that silence has become a kind of music. It plays between the pages of books I now have time to read, in the echo of Walter's voice on the old recorder, and in the softness of my own steps through a house that finally belongs to me, in more ways than legal documents could ever describe. I donated the second living room set, repainted the walls in the guest room, started a journal not of bitterness, but of memory. Not the big memories, the loud ones, but the small ones. The way Walter used to whistle when he watered the plants, the smell of fresh laundry in July, the quiet satisfaction of being needed, really needed. Sometimes I wonder if Leo ever thinks of me, if Caroline rereads the message I left in the final will, if they realize they lost more than property, because that's the thing about trying to erase someone who remembers. She may vanish from your plans, but not from the story. I never wanted to be the loudest voice. I just wanted to be heard when it mattered. And now I have been. Not with shouts, not with threats, just with the quiet weight of a name they tried to remove and couldn't.